I'm not a doctor or in any medical profession. I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian. So you could take this presentation and my story for what it's worth. But with that being said, some of the things I share may save you or someone you care about from an early death. As we begin, I'd like you to think about this. If tomorrow your doctor told you in 6 months you would die of cancer, what would you change? What if you knew a year from now you would have a heart attack and die? Would you make changes to your diet if you knew it would help? Americans suffer from a host of chronic diseases. The top three causes of death in America are from chronic disease. Sad thing is, in most cases, they are preventable and reversible. We all at some point in our lives have admitted this in some way, maybe not consciously. In your 20s, you think you're invincible. In your 30s, you expect to add a few pounds and maybe relax into a way of life. In your 40s, you're busy with your teenage kids. The last thing you think about is yourself and your health. Your health gets put on the back burner as the waistline increases and you move the belt a few more notches. I wanted to share a video with you.
What will your last 10 years look like? Will you be quick enough for a game of tag with your grandchild? Strong enough to embrace every moment? Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? It's time to decide. The average Canadian will spend their last 10 years in sickness. Change your future at makehealthlast.ca.
We are living longer, but we're living those last years in poor health, requiring more and more costly prescription drugs to manage our chronic diseases. I've seen my parents age and pass, working into their 80s because they didn't account for the medications they had to take because of chronic disease. I've seen my father-in-law, a retired physical education teacher from Brooklyn, who played tennis every day in his retirement community till chronic disease took its toll. Now in his mid-70s, he uses a walker and no longer plays tennis. I hope for myself a different path. 800,000 people die of heart disease every year in the United States. It's mainly caused by inflammation in our arteries in the form of plaques. They have found streaky deposits of fat in children's arteries as young as 10 years of age. It is safe to say everyone who eats the standard American diet has coronary artery disease. It just hasn't been diagnosed yet. I haven't always been as healthy as I am now. I was another statistic of chronic disease. In 2008, at the age of 49, I had a heart attack in my lower anterior descending artery. It's called the Widowmaker because 90% of people who have a heart attack there don't survive. I was one of the lucky 10%. That's me on the right just after my heart attack. My friends at work don't remember me that large. I weighed 225 pounds. Since going whole food plant-based, I lost 60 pounds. I'm off of all medications, even a daily aspirin. My total cholesterol is 120. Picture on the bike, I weigh what I did in high school, 165 pounds. After I lost the weight, I had so much energy I had to do something. So I took up running. I finished my first marathon a couple of months ago at the age of 58. I can even fit into my old Navy uniform I wore in my 20s. When you get a stent, they place you on a battery of pills. A blood thinner to prevent clots, a statin to lower your cholesterol, a drug to lower blood pressure, and an ACE inhibitor to hopefully prevent future heart attacks. Also a daily aspirin. I thought, these are pills for someone in their 70s. What are the long-term effects for someone in their 40s? My stent is about the size of 2 grains of rice. The stent doesn't get rid of the plaque, it just opens the passage. If you don't change your habits, the artery will just fill with plaque again. I met a man in his 60s. He's had 19 stents. He's had stents upon stents. He said if somebody would have told him, if his doctor would have told him after the first stent, change your diet and you won't have to go through this again, he would have done it. But he had to find out on his own. It's amazing how small an artery is and how it can cause so many problems. Also, if you have plaques in your heart, it just goes to say that you also have them someplace else in your body. On the left are the benefits of being on a statin drug. On the right is some of the side effects, along with this and along with this. The last 2 pages were all the side effects of the last statin I was on. The last statin I was on was Crestor. These drugs almost crippled me. The first one caused plantar fasciitis. The second one they put me on caused my toes to splay like somebody was stretching them apart. And the third one caused generalized muscle weakness where I couldn't get out of a car without the help of a hiking pole or get up a flight of stairs. My doctor said that drug companies report 10% of the population are statin sensitive, meaning they can't tolerate the drug side effects. I guess I was one of the 10%, but he feels that it's a much higher percentage than the pharmaceutical companies state. The reason they had me on statin was to raise my HDL. I was never diagnosed with high cholesterol or high blood pressure. After my heart attack, I was 48 with pills with adverse side effects. They wouldn't guarantee me that I wouldn't have another heart attack. Could I regain my health? Could I get rid of these pills? Chronic diseases cannot be cured by medications. Medications only treat the symptoms, not the cause of chronic disease. But you can halt the progression of chronic disease, or in many cases even heal yourself from a chronic disease just by changing what you eat. Through research and lectures I have listened to, this was the bellwether statement that caused me to think differently about my course of health. These drugs were not going to cure my condition, just manage symptoms till the disease progressed to a worse prognosis. Is that all there was? A slow, steady decline to the end? Taking pills with known side effects that might be worse than the disease itself. A new study in the Lancet says stents, the devices they place in blocked arteries to open them up, may not be as beneficial as once thought. So stents are not as effective as they once thought. Statins are not much better either. Another study shows the ineffectiveness of statins with only a 5% reduction in heart attacks over 5 years. So what's a heart patient to do? 80% of heart disease is based on lifestyle and environmental factors. Only 20% is related to genetics. When I first had my heart attack, I found this book. In it, the doctor says, give up dairy, cheese, meat, and eggs. I said it was too extreme. Everything in moderation became my mantra. So I followed the American Heart Association diet, but only stricter. We moved to a small 8-acre farm, raised our own chickens, grew our own food. I skipped red meat, even though the American Heart Association said I could have lean cuts a few times a month. The American Heart Association said I could have 4 eggs a week. I had 2 from my own chickens in an omelet on Saturdays. A year later, I had a scare and was rushed from school on one of the last days in June to the hospital. Luckily for me, the doctors didn't put any more stents in me. They said I had blockages, about 60% occluded, but instead of stenting, they said they would just wait. After that scare, I began to take things seriously. Within the next 2 years, with the help of my wonderful wife, Sherry, and a great internist, we overhauled our diets and were converts to Dr. Esselstyn's advice and research. You might have heard this week, the head of the American Heart Association, who is a cardiologist, had a heart attack after giving his annual speech to the association. Here is a doctor who hasn't read the research. Dr. Esselstyn says, if the truth be known, coronary artery disease is a toothless paper tiger that need never ever exist. And if it does exist, it need never ever progress. I can't help but think of friends and family members who died from coronary artery disease. It was preventable. It was reversible. Listen to the doctor in his own words.
Like a lot of women, Kintz did not experience the classic chest pain, but rather fatigue and a pain in her jaw.
He said, you're going to have open heart surgery. He says, I can fix you today. I can just take you right down to OR and I can operate on you right now. My son was in there and he was ready to wheel me down to the operating room because he was frantic. You know, it's terrifying.
What Kintz did next may surprise you. She turned the surgeon down cold, said no to open heart surgery, and decided to take a chance.
I bought some parsnips the other day. Always have sweet potatoes on hand.
Using food as medicine.
I love these. These are my onions. These are wonderful. So I
like
love
President
these.
Clinton,
Cut 'em off.
Kintz has given up the food she loves, like butter and cheese. She's betting her life on Dr. Esselstyn's diet. She had a heart attack.
Oh yeah, I know.
You know, Sharon.
Oh yeah.
Doctors recommended she have an intervention. She's not doing it. Is there a downside? Could she be putting herself at risk?
No. I think that's an excellent question. In hundreds of patients, data now going back over 20 years, and this most recent study about a decade, once they start eating this way, you'll make yourself heart attack proof.
Heart
Going back
attack
over
proof.
We know that if people are eating this way, they are not going to have a heart attack.
Esselstyn thinks heart disease is completely preventable, no matter what sort of family history you have, simply by eating right.
It's a foodborne illness, and we're never going to end the epidemic with stents, with bypasses, with the drugs, because none of it is treating causation of the illness.
On the left is a coronary artery, lower anterior descending artery that is, you see where it is marked, that it's all crimped. It looks not as big as the rest of the artery. Well, this one patient of Dr. Esselstyn's went on a plant-based diet, and in less than 3 years is the same artery on the right. You can see how it is fully functional, it's open, it's not crimped like it was before. Basically, all the plaque blockages have been removed, all by eating a plant-based diet. This is what happens when you have coronary artery disease and change to a whole food, plant-based, no oil diet. Dr. Esselstyn also says genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Just because you have the genes that may give you cancer or heart disease does not mean you will get cancer or heart disease. A new area of science is giving us insight into chronic disease. You've heard of the human genome, a sampling of your genome, and they can tell so much about you, from what color hair and skin you have to your tolerance for certain medications. It also lets you know if you have a gene that may lead to cancer. What researchers have found is that genes just don't turn on to cause cancer, they have to be triggered. And that is triggered by the epigenome. The epigenome is controlled by environmental exposures and lifestyle choices such as diet and exercise. I could talk to you for hours on the benefits of eating a whole food plant-based diet. I can give you peer-reviewed research papers proving why this is the healthiest way for you to eat. I can tell you how hospitals have begun to change their patient meals over to a whole food plant-based diet. I could also tell you about IGF-1, insulin growth factor 1, and how it is in all meat and dairy and how it makes cancer grow. I could tell you about how a whole food plant-based diet can reverse almost every chronic disease, and yes, even prevent colon, prostate, and breast cancer. I could tell you how the 5 blue zones in the world, this is where people consistently live to be over 100 years of age, are predominantly plant-based or plant-leaning, which accounts for their longevity. Instead, I want to talk to you about chronic disease. 80% of all deaths in America are due to chronic conditions. Most chronic conditions are preventable or reversible. There's even evidence pointing that Alzheimer's and Parkinson's may be due in part to the standard American diet and the formation of plaques and inflammation in the arteries. And I read an article just this morning that says Alzheimer's may even be reversible by switching to a plant-based diet. Chronic diseases are labeled as pre-existing conditions. 1 in 2 Americans have pre-existing conditions. Chronic diseases affect approximately 133 million Americans, representing more than 40% of the total population of this country. And the sad thing is once you have one disease, you are more likely to get more. If you have heart disease, most likely you also have high cholesterol or high blood pressure. If you're type 2 diabetic, you also typically have high blood sugar. These are the major chronic diseases. How inflammation manifests itself in your body can differ from person to person. For me, it was heart disease. Someone else, it might be cancer, diabetes, or arthritis. My brother was just diagnosed with kidney disease, but he refuses to believe that a diet could contribute to it. And guys, just for the record, the first signs you may have blockages in your arteries is if you have ED, erectile dysfunction. It is the proverbial canary in the coal mine. The blood vessels are smaller down there, so you see the results there before you'll ever have a heart attack or stroke. You don't need a pill to fix erectile dysfunction. You need to treat the cause of erectile dysfunction. Let me go off on a tangent for a bit. Petrochemical agriculture was supposed to revolutionize farming. It was supposed to get rid of disease, pests, and increase yields. It treated the problems, but it didn't feed the system, the soil. In Iowa in the 1800s, they had 14 to 16 inches of topsoil. Today, they have less than 8 inches. Less topsoil, lower quality of crops, crops that have less nutrition than 100 years ago. Petrochemicals didn't feed the soil, just the plant. Your body is like the farmer's soil. Medications don't feed the system, they just manage conditions. For the best quality of life, whether in a farmer's field or in your body, you have to give the system what it needs. That comes in the form of good nutrition. This is what is recommended that we eat by the Harvard School of Public Health. This is what America typically eats. 3 times the amount of protein we need. Fiber is almost non-existent in the diet. And lack of fiber is one of the major causes of colon cancer and IBS in America. You only get fibers from plants. As you can see in this chart, this shows heart disease and cancer in relation to plant food consumption. The higher rates of heart disease and cancer, the lower amounts of plant-based consumption. Many people have tried various diets to no avail. Most diet programs expect you to come back. They need you to come back because they need to make money. That's their business model. Keep you coming back, buying their food, their system. Yet, eating healthy need not be complicated or expensive. It is the only diet, not Weight Watchers, not Atkins, not Paleo, not Shakeology, that has peer-reviewed medical research that shows long-term cure rates of chronic diseases. The others may help you lose weight, but they won't help you fight disease. And it is the only diet to actually reverse coronary artery disease. So, what is a whole food plant-based diet? Anything that comes from a plant. Fruits, vegetables, grains, and legumes. In this diet, you also avoid all processed foods. Processed foods are heavy in salt, sugar, and fat. You're also going to avoid dairy, such as no yogurt. Also, no highly processed breads or white pasta. You can have whole grain anything, but you're going to avoid the more processed grains. You should never be hungry or go hungry. This is not a starvation diet. If you're hungry, you eat. As long as it's a compliant food, you eat. In fact, people say they feel guilty eating this way because they feel like they're eating so much, yet they're still losing weight. And that's because plants are nutrient dense with lots of vitamins, minerals, and fiber, yet they're not calorically dense. So you can eat a lot more and not gain weight. It's so much more than just salads. This is a high carb, low fat diet. That is not a bad thing. Not all carbs are equal though. Plants are where most of your vitamins and minerals come from. It is also the only place you get your fiber from. Fiber feeds your colon and your immune system. Only 3% of the population gets the minimum daily requirement of fiber. Our bodies process carbs for energy. That is why endurance athletes load up on carbs before a big race. What about my protein? I hear that all the time. Americans eat 3 times more protein than they need. That's what's contributing to the rise in chronic diseases. With all that extra protein, we should all look like Arnold, but we don't. Do you know how much you need a day? The average 20-year-old man needs 56 grams. Women, 46 grams. Who tells you need more protein? The meat and dairy industries. Why? To sell you more of their products. This is Patrick Bobumian. He's the Germany's strongest man. He gets all the protein he needs from plants. Nobody would call him weak. And you might have heard recently that the NBA and the NFL, different athletes are starting to switch over to a plant-based diet. It helps them recover faster from injury, helps them recover faster from long, strenuous workouts. The people who eat the most animal protein have the most heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. This is a quote from T. Colin Campbell, Professor Emeritus at Cornell University, co-author of the book The China Study. T. Colin Campbell went to Cornell to improve cow dairy production. In his studies, he found some things that were disturbing. He did one test, or one research, where they gave rats cancer, and then they gave it protein in the form of casein, which is found in milk. Dr. Campbell found that anytime the protein got above 10%, the cancer would grow. Below 10%, the cancer wouldn't grow. He could turn it on and off just by controlling how much protein went in. So he thought, well, maybe it's all protein. So he gave, instead of casein, he gave chicken, he gave fish, he gave beef. And the same thing happened. Anytime the protein amount of the diet got above 10%, the cancer would grow. Below 10%, it would stop. So he goes, maybe it's protein in general. So he gave the rats vegetable protein. 10%, nothing happened to the cancer. 20% protein, nothing happened to the cancer. He could give as much vegetable protein as he wanted and the cancer wouldn't grow. It only grew with animal protein. This is my breakfast bowl. I get half my daily amount of protein just from eating my breakfast. And you might say, well, it's not the same kind of protein. And yes, you'd be right. Here's a 4-ounce piece of beef. Where are the vitamins, the fiber? The only thing you get from meat is protein. Yes, you get some iron, saturated fat, cholesterol, and lots of IGF-1, insulin growth factor 1, which is in all meat and dairy. Cancer loves to feed on it. And don't believe your friend who says cholesterol doesn't affect your arteries. All you have to do is look to Bob Harper. You know Bob Harper, host trainer on The Biggest Loser? He believed that hype about dietary cholesterol not being bad for you. He would put butter and coconut oil into his morning coffee. He would call it bulletproof coffee. They should call it heart attack coffee. It ended with him on the operating table, his heart in shock to bring him back from death. He says it's hereditary. He says he has lipoprotein A, something 1 in 5 people have. Guess what? I'm one of those 5 people. So who's the biggest loser? Someone who refuses to believe diet can affect his health, or someone who takes charge and changes the habits that are killing them? Sorry, Bob, you can't out-exercise a bad diet. You all probably know someone who you thought was fit and healthy, who dropped dead suddenly. Does this work? Jessica Bowen, at age 29, had stage 3 invasive breast cancer. She did the chemo and radiation to no avail. She began her own research, saw the documentary Forks Over Knives. If you haven't seen this, please do. It's on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and iTunes. She wrote to one of my favorite whole food plant-based docs, Dr. John McDougall, and began eating a whole food plant-based diet. She is now cancer-free and has lost over 92 pounds. That was in 2012. For cancer survivors, disease-free survival means someone with that type of cancer who is alive and well without a reoccurrence of the cancer 5 years after diagnosis. This is Lainey Mulraith. She wrote the book My Plant-Based Journey. That's her on the left at age 48 and on the right at age 63. Kitten Barbarossa, she lost 300 pounds. Lori and Ed, he lost 140, she lost 150 pounds. Summer McGowan, she beat ulcerative colitis, lost 100 pounds, and now she runs marathons. A friend of mine, Tim Kaufman, he has a blog at Fat Man Rants. He was born with a genetic disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. His joints are very loose and hypermobile. The excess weight he carried was too much for his joints to handle, so he was fitted with expensive leg braces. Now, after losing his weight, he runs marathons and no longer uses braces. Josh Ladani, boy from the Bayou, grew up on everything fried. He played football in college and got injured. After the injury, he kept eating like he was still playing football. He wanted to lose weight for graduation, and he started running. He read a book called Finding Ultra by Rich Roll, who lost weight after eating a plant-based diet. So Josh decided to try this way of eating. He started running, started losing weight. He now is an ultra-marathoner finishing a 100-mile race in Florida in under 24 hours. Last December, he was selected to be on the cover of Runner's World magazine. And because of him, his family combined has lost over 1,000 pounds. He was recently in People's Magazine and on Good Morning America, along with Tim Kaufman. He started a Facebook group called the Missing Chins Club, where he helped 52 men lose over 4,000 pounds. I know a teacher who's using it to heal from IBS, another healing her and her daughter's autoimmune issues. A teacher is using this way of eating to halt the progression of macular degeneration. A vice principal, after 2 weeks, lost 19 pounds in an effort to halt the progression of his own diabetes. Another is using it to control her blood pressure and reduce her cholesterol. And another teacher lost over 100 pounds. One teacher is using it after recovering from colon cancer, using it to prevent any reoccurrence of the disease. Nutrition is powerful. The human body wants to thrive. Its natural state is to thrive, not just exist. Even with all the abuse taken in with poor nutrition, it still wants to live. If not for yourself, for your family, consider switching to a plant-based diet. It's all in your hands, not your doctor's, not a health coach or some company's products. It's in your grocery store in the produce section. You're only one meal away from a healthier you.